Good evening, folks. My name is Ben Puzanov with Thames Valley's planning team, and I am joined this evening to my right by Superintendent Jeff Vogt, Superintendent of Facility Services and Capital Planning, and Eric Miles, planner with Thames Valley. Welcome to everyone on the call, and thank you for volunteering to represent your school community as part of this attendance area review process. We are here today to present an initial attendance area review report for Southeast London. The report contemplates boundary options for the new Southeast London Elementary School and alterations to the Summerside Elementary School boundary. This meeting is the first step in the public consultation process for this review, and that is intended to provide school communities with information regarding what is being considered and how to provide the board with feedback, comments, and suggestions. Up on the screen is our agenda for this evening. We'll start off with a background as well as an overview of the attendance area review process, as well as the procedure document and the timelines associated with this review. We'll then provide a summary of the roles and responsibilities of attendance area review committee members. This will then be followed by a presentation of the initial attendance area review report, and we'll then have an opportunity for questions. We'll be monitoring the Q&A box during the discussion, and as some of the questions may be answered through the course of the presentation, we'll be addressing questions at the end. We also encourage you to ask questions and seek clarification verbally during that portion of the meeting. Before outlining the proposed boundary changes under consideration, we're going to start by providing an overview of this attendance area review process and the role of attendance area review committee members. An attendance area review process is one by which Thames Valley changes boundaries to optimize enrollment and balance attendance across specific geographic areas. This is a process that's generally needed because of a growing or declining enrollment, or in this case, to establish a boundary for a new school, and this is done in order to ensure that we continue offering optimal learning environments for all of our students. Thames Valley has a procedure for attendance area reviews, and this is available through the attendance area review website that's been set up. It's shown on the screen here, tvdsb.ca/SELAAR. The website has many other resources, including a question and answer page and maps to show proposed boundary changes for each school. Prior to considering an attendance area review, the Board of Trustees receives what's known as an initial attendance area review report from administration that details current and potential attendance areas, current enrollment and accommodations, enrollment projections, current and proposed residential development as well as community trends, and finally a timeline for implementation. If trustees initiate the attendance area review process, formal public consultation is then undertaken through the formation of an attendance area review committee and school level subcommittees whose feedback is input is then considered by trustees as part of the decision-making process. The initial attendance area review report for this review was presented to trustees in October of this year. Administration was then asked to proceed with seeking public feedback. Volunteers to sit on this attendance area review committee were then recruited with the help of principals of the schools involved in the review, and would like to thank you again for volunteering to represent your school communities as part of this important process. Following this evening's attendance area review committee meeting, attendance area review committee members of each school will be asked to host school-level meetings to obtain feedback from each school community regarding the boundary change options under consideration. The attendance area review committee members of each school will need to designate a chair and secretary for their school-level meetings to help manage the discussion as well as to record feedback. Following the receipt of public feedback from the school communities, administration will review the comments and prepare a final attendance area review report. Our goal always through these public consultation processes is to improve upon the options under consideration. As part of the attendance area review process, members of the public are also provided with a further opportunity through delegations to the Board of Trustees regarding the final report and its recommendations. This is then followed by a decision of trustees at a subsequent meeting of the board. Once the decision is made, administration will then work to implement the boundary changes in accordance with the timeline as determined by trustees. In this particular case, this will be when the new Southeast London Elementary School opens. This slide provides an overview of the timeline for this particular attendance area review. Following this evening's attendance area review committee meeting, it's expected that the school level subcommittee meetings to obtain feedback will be held from now through to mid-February. In accordance with the procedure, there are a number of important dates specifically related to public consultation. January 28th is the deadline for subcommittees to request any additional information that the school communities may require to supplement the information that's contained in the initial attendance area review report that you will hear about this evening. This information will be intended to assist school communities with evaluating the options under consideration. Administration will distribute any additional material that's requested to all subcommittees involved in the review. February 11th is the last date on which school-level subcommittee meetings may be held. And finally, February 26th is the deadline for subcommittees to submit reports on their school community's feedback. Administration will be reviewing the public feedback received through the school community reports and assembling that final attendance area review report for trustees' consideration, with the goal again being to improve upon the options presented. The presentation of the final report, public delegations, and ultimately a trustee decision are expected to occur in April and May of 2025, with implementation of any approved changes planned for the 26-27 school year when the new Southeast London Elementary School is expected to open. As mentioned, the attendance area review committee is made up of volunteers from each school that is involved in the attendance area review process, including parents and caregivers, chair of the school council, and chair of the Home and School Association. Attendance area review committee members are vital to the success of the attendance area review process and are critical for obtaining feedback from school communities regarding the boundary change options under consideration. In addition to running their respective school-level subcommittee meetings, attendance area review committee members are responsible for producing that subcommittee report, which documents the public feedback from the school community. After the meeting this evening, administration will be providing attendance area review committee members with template documents to assist subcommittees with running the meetings, including agenda and minute-taking documents, as well as a subcommittee feedback report template. This presentation deck will also be provided to subcommittees for inclusion in each respective presentation to school communities. Subcommittees are, of course, welcome to supplement this with any additional information as they see fit. Thames Valley staff will act as a resource following the meetings if any questions arise or additional information is required. Eric will now provide an overview of the initial attendance area review report. Over to you, Eric.
Thanks, Ben. So on the screen is a brief overview of the schools that are involved in the review. So we've got Summerside Public School, which has a capacity of 553 pupil places and had to be capped to new registrations in 2022-23, which was the first year of its operation. John P. Robarts was designated the interim accommodation school for Summerside and has been receiving students from that boundary since that school was capped. It's important to note that no boundary changes are proposed for John P. Robarts through this review. And then finally, we've got the new school, which was approved in Southeast London, and that school will have a capacity of 655 pupil places. And we'll see a lot of growth in the coming years from new development that is planned for the area, which I'll talk about in future slides. So with the opening of this new school, the goals and objectives of this review are as follows. Establish a boundary for the new Southeast London Elementary School by splitting the current Summerside boundary. Manage current and projected enrollment at both Summerside and the new school in order to reduce reliance on portables and continue offering students exceptional learning environments. And finally, reducing reliance on school bus transportation. So if we move on to the next slide. For context, this image shows the location of Summerside currently and where the new Southeast London School is proposed to be, or will be located, sorry. So it's on the east side of Jackson Road, just off of Gatestone Boulevard. So if we go to the next slide, as you can see on this map, there's a significant amount of development planned in Southeast London. So the dotted line on this map is the current boundary for Summerside, and you can see all the colored parcels that represent either active or ongoing development applications. So a majority of the development is planned on the east side of Jackson Road, which is proposed to be part of the new school's boundary, which will be discussed on the following slides. But there's still a lot of development planned and being constructed along Highbury Avenue, which you can see there, which will remain in the Summerside boundary. So as a result, as I mentioned, it'll be important to balance enrollment across both schools by accounting for this future development in both boundary options. So this slide shows the utilization of both Summerside and John P. Robarts during the previous school year. So with the opening of the new school, the utilization at Summerside is projected to decrease to a more efficient number. And this will be discussed in the coming slides when the proposed boundary options are presented. This slide shows the distribution of students at both Summerside and John P. Robarts during the previous school year. So as shown, most of the students are coming from the area west of Jackson Road and north of Commissioners Road. However, with the amount of development planned east of Jackson Road, there is expected to be a lot of students coming from this area in the near future. So now I'm going to talk about the potential boundary options, and these will be provided on the following slides. So while these interventions are designed to balance facility utilizations in specific geographic areas, each produced or proposed boundary adjustment considers the broader impacts on the community. So for example, boundaries have been designed to follow major roads or features like parks and railways wherever possible. Attention was also paid to modes of transportation, preferring boundary adjustments that reduce reliance on school bus transportation. It's noted that proposed boundaries for the new school are much larger than the proposed Summerside boundary options, and that is because most of the area to the east and south is outside of London's urban growth boundary, meaning that new residential development cannot occur here on a large scale. And the remaining lands are either industrial or agricultural in nature along the Veterans Memorial Parkway and Highway 401 corridors. So jumping into option one, which is shown on this slide, it will result in a boundary for Summerside that is bound by Highbury Avenue to the west, Bradley Avenue to the south, Commissioners Road to the north, and Jackson Road, Lighthouse Road, and Meadowgate Boulevard to the east. The boundary for the new school will encompass the remainder of the lands to the south and east of the current Summerside boundary. So from a projection and utilization standpoint, these graphs show the projected enrollment for Summerside in the new school under option one. The green line on both graphs represents the school's capacity, so 553 for Summerside and 655 for the new school. And the blue line represents the projected enrollment. So this option is preferred by administration as it results in fewer student moves to the new school and does a better job of balancing enrollment over the long term between both schools. Under this option, Summerside would be at capacity when the new school opens, but is projected to grow to about 120% utilization by 2033. The new school is projected to be slightly below capacity at about 80% when it opens, but is projected to grow over the long term to approximately 137% by 2036. So option two is similar to option one, but the southeastern corner of the proposed Summerside boundary under option one is revised slightly to send more students to the new school. So under this option, the land's bound by Evans Boulevard to the north, Chelton Road to the west, Meadowgate Boulevard to the east, and Bradley Avenue to the south would be designated to the new school instead of Summerside. So as you can see under this option, the new school will open closer to capacity than under option one, but will face more long-term enrollment pressure, resulting in the need for more portables. Under this option, the new school is projected to open at about 90% utilization, but grow to approximately 147% by 2036. Summerside is also projected to be under capacity when the new school opens under this option, but will reach a maximum utilization of approximately 108% by 2034. So this slide shows a comparison of both options. As mentioned, option one results in a lower maximum utilization at the new school and does a better job of balancing enrollment at both schools, ensuring that both schools are closer to optimal utilizations over the long term. I'll now hand the presentation back over to Ben to facilitate the Q&A portion of this evening's agenda. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Eric.
So we'll jump right into the Q&A portion, I think, at this point. Just noticing in the Q&A portion from Jenna Lamb, does this report account for any new development along Bradley or the new development to the west of Meadowgate Road? I believe that to you, Eric.
Yep, I can answer that. Yeah, it certainly does. So all the projections account for all development that's planned for that area.
Folks, feel free to post your question in the chat box or alternatively unmute your mic and ask away.
I'll ask a question. It's Jenna Lamb. I'm curious why we are building a school that is already going to be over capacity within a year or two, and how this, yeah, if you can just address the concern that these capacity numbers are really not solved by the new school, it helps a little.
Thank you for the question. So maybe I'll provide a quick overview of the capital approval process of the Ministry of Education and the way we're funded for new capital, and hopefully that helps sort of answer that question. But so typically what happens is about once a year, sometimes more frequently, sometimes less, school boards get an opportunity to submit business cases to the Ministry of Education for new schools and additions. Essentially asking the province to fund sort of enrollment pressure areas with new capital. So typically when that happens, the ministry in its evaluation is looking at existing enrollment pressure. And they're looking to fund new capital that's going to address enrollment of students that are already present. Unfortunately, as part of the evaluation criteria, we don't have the ability to really proactively build schools that are sort of over capacity. We're looking to essentially build the schools that are going to accommodate the students that are already there when the business case is being submitted. And the other piece of this is that the ministry is also looking to fund schools not to necessarily the apex of the enrollment, but to the steady state. That way you've got a stable enrollment over the life of the building rather than funding to sort of the critical peak of enrollment and then having this the building sort of sit partially full for the remainder of the building's sort of capital life. Hopefully that's helpful. I will say one of the things that our team does through Eric's leadership, particularly in the City of London, is we do track all new development applications, things like official plan reviews and settlement boundary reviews. So anytime the city looks to expand boundaries, we do assess impact that future development is going to have on our schools. So we will be in a position to sort of continue seeking new capital if it becomes required again in this particular area. And we'll be working very closely with our colleagues in the city on that. So hopefully that provides some useful information there. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Kate Powell. I do have a question when you guys are talking about busing and everything. We're in Victoria on the River, and I would assume, regardless of which school we are able to stay at, that we would still need to be bused due to like the transportation along Commissioners.
Eric, do you want to sort of review the area there as it relates to both options?
Yeah, so that's the area that's north of Commissioners Road there. We have reached out to Student Transportation Services to determine the full impact both options will have on busing. And typically, as you mentioned, if there are major roads involved, even if the area is within the walk zone for a new school, it would still typically receive busing for safety reasons. So we're still waiting to hear back from Student Transportation Services. We expect to have that information within the next month or so. So it should be available before subcommittee reports need to be wrapped up. But that's typically one of the decision-making criteria, as I mentioned. So Commissioners Road in this case would likely result in busing still being provided from that area.
Okay, yeah, because I've talked to the city and they have no interest in making that area any safer with sidewalks or lights or anything. So,
And just to confirm, that area is within the attendance area of the new school under both options, correct, Eric?
That's right, yeah.
Thanks.
From Michelle, we have a question online. Ben or Eric, all about legacy agreements here, but would students be able to remain at Summerside if they choose to? All those who are attending Summerside have already had to move schools twice. This means they would now have to move a third time. Given that this is in less than 5 years from the time they've had to move, we're hoping one can remain if they choose. And if not, but I hope the answer is yes, would those who are going into their grade 8 year be able to remain so they aren't moving for only 1 year and can graduate with their friends?
Thank you for the question. So this is precisely the sort of feedback we're hoping to receive from the subcommittees. I would encourage folks to discuss that with your school communities and provide that feedback as part of the reports. At the end of the day, though, we do have a new school that's coming online in 26, 27, and we do need to fill the school. So we wouldn't be able to offer legacy agreements for everybody, but certainly we'd be looking forward to receiving the subcommittee's recommendations regarding which grade divisions will be appropriate for legacies. And ultimately, trustees will review all of that feedback and take that into consideration as part of the decision-making process.
We have a question from Sonia. Eric, probably helpful if you go back to the slide that shows the projections. I'm wanting to clarify the growth numbers. I believe that it was stated that we're predicting both schools will grow. Does this mean Summerside would get more kids and more portables? It doesn't sound like the portables will be leaving Summerside anytime soon.
Yeah, so the consideration when creating both of these options was to try to balance enrollment as much as possible between both schools. Both schools are projected to be over capacity under both options in the long term. Summerside under option 1 would be slightly at a higher capacity than versus option 2. But the utilizations are projected to be lower than they currently are. So we do anticipate that some portables would be leaving Summerside as compared to the current situation. Thank you.
Ben, could you maybe talk about how many portables ballpark? We can't commit to an exact number because there's a lot of factors around grade configuration, et cetera, but what we're thinking.
Certainly, Jeff. So if we look at option 1, we see utilization of basically 100% when the new school opens. So Summerside would likely not require any portables at that time. And then as we sort of move on to 2030 and 2036, we'll likely be looking at somewhere in the range of 2 or 3 portables over that time. But again, that's obviously subject to sort of programming needs. And as we look to option 2, as has been alluded to earlier by Eric, certainly Summerside's got slightly less enrollment in this particular option, but then the trade-off is that the new school under this option would have significantly greater enrollment, triggering more portables on that site. So we're certainly looking forward to receiving feedback from the school communities regarding which option is preferred. But yeah, portables certainly will not be on the Summerside Public School property at the same level as they are today. Hopefully that's helpful. Thank you.
From Jenna, was an option explored drawing natural boundaries at Jackson Road?
Yeah, I could answer that. Thanks for the question. That was looked at, but ultimately from a enrollment balancing perspective, it didn't make sense to do a boundary along solely Jackson Road.
Sorry, just following up on that question. So there'll be kids on one side of the street that we're going to Summerside that will be moved across to the other school, even just because they live on a certain side of Chelton, or sorry, I'm not looking at the inlay map, but in both conditions, you'll have kids on one side of the street split from their neighbors across the road. So that's I understand the balancing needs, but how do you guys address that, like, individual challenges of kids, neighbors not being in the same school?
So typically, when we draw attendance boundaries, we do have to follow sort of natural geographic features. Typically, the center line of the road is a fairly common boundary. With that being said, we would certainly welcome feedback from the committee regarding alternative options that you want to put forward as sort of other options to consider as part of this review. And this is really the entire purpose of the public consultation process, to strengthen the options under consideration. And that may include additional options that have not yet been presented.
We have a question here from Tina. I think this one's for you, Ben. Is it possible, reasonable to make the recommendation that current students in Summerside and Sibley's be given a choice to remain at the current school? Also, can we ask for provisions for student transportation for those legacy students?
Thank you for the question. Yeah, so as mentioned earlier, in terms of legacy agreements, we would be looking for recommendations from the subcommittees regarding what would be appropriate, with the caveat that we do need to fill the new school that's been approved here and will open in the 26-27 school year. Regarding transportation, transportation is typically offered for the first year of the legacy agreement, and that's offered to in situations where you've got, say, a grade 8 student who will be legacied for that year. It's offered to their sibling as well for that year only, following which any siblings would return to the designated school. Any sort of longer timelines would have significant impacts on bus routes and just the ability to staff those, and running duplicate routes out of one neighborhood is certainly not ideal from a staffing perspective for our bus operators. Thank you.
This is Sonia Munn. I just had another question about the school that's holding all of those students, JP Robarts. If anyone is currently attending that school and maybe going into grade 8 or another grade and has friends over there and wants to stay in that school, will there be provisions for those individuals, or will they be required to move over to Summerside or the other new Southeast school that's being opened?
Thank you. So that again would fall under a legacy agreement option, which trustees consider as part of the decision-making process. And again, we would welcome that feedback as part of subcommittee reports. Thank you. And I see there's another hand up. I believe Ms. Pell.
Hi, I just have a question. I've talked to our trustee, and you guys have mentioned at this meeting as well about how we were capped back in 2023. However, each fall we bring over about 80 students, both fall of 2023 and this past fall as well. So I'm just wondering if that has been taken into consideration and if that will continue until the new school opens.
Thank you for the question. I believe you're referring to the annual process that happens when space becomes available at Summerside, and students who are attending JP Robarts have the opportunity to essentially return to their home school. So yes, that is expected to continue, subject to space becoming available at Summerside. Jenna, go ahead, please.
Oh, sorry. I think you answered my question.
Thank you. Any other questions? Oh,
I do have another question. I think from a parent perspective, a lot of us are very concerned about our kids being shuffled again. And I'm just curious, I realize that a lot of decision making has to be made, but if you can share any, like, what normally happens in these situations so we can have a better understanding and be preparing our kids for more disruption to their school. We've gone through COVID, we've had our schools closed and reshuffled. So yeah, if you can speak to what normally happens in these processes for in terms of legacy agreements, that would be helpful.
sure. Thank you for the question. So Thames Valley is growing quite rapidly, so we do have 7 schools that are in various stages of planning or construction, and all of those have been approved by the Ministry of Education over the last couple of years. And the expectation on the ministry's part including for the new Southeast school, is that we do fill the schools when they open. With that being said, historically what has transpired is students entering grade 8 in the year of implementation and their siblings have received a legacy agreement option to remain at their current school with transportation if they are eligible. And then following that initial implementation year, siblings would be expected to return to their designated school. With that being said, we would welcome feedback again as part of this attendance area review process from the subcommittees. And ultimately, trustees do take all feedback under advisement as they make a final decision. See, there's another hand up. Sonia, go ahead, please.
Yes, this is Sonia Munn again. Just a question about the portables. So you said that the portables would be reduced or totally removed. I'm just wondering when that would be done. So would it be ready when the new school is open? So would all those portables be removed in the summer so that in 2026, when this new school is open, presumably those portables would be gone? Or is it a slow process to make sure we don't need those portables? So it might take a year or two for those removal.
Thank you for the question. So as part of the staffing process that we would undertake in the year prior to the opening of the new Southeast London Elementary School, we would look to see how many teachers we would need based on the enrollment that's projected for Summerside for that year. And then any excess portables would be removed. I can't promise that they'll all be removed at once, but certainly we're cognizant that the site has sort of limited space as a result of those portables, and we would work with school administration to free up as much space as possible in a timely manner. So I hope that's helpful.
Thank you. That's very helpful.
Any other questions?
Could I ask a question about, I believe there's supposed to be a daycare facility in the new school. Is that correct? And what is the size of that?
Yeah, Ben's going to look for exact here, but we believe it's 88 kids. So a 5-classroom setup with infant, toddlers, and preschoolers. And that RFP is just recently closed, and I believe our purchasing department is evaluating the proponent. So I would expect sort of later in the winter that announcements would be made around who is operating that center.
I just have one follow-up question. So when we got our new Summerside Public School, they had a beautiful play area created for the daycare, which is wonderful. I'm just wondering about the new school and what types of amenities may be like provided. So we don't currently have a playground at Summerside. Is that something that would be built into the budget for this new school? And is there going to be a nice daycare play area as well?
Thanks for the question. This is one of those very confusing ones, unfortunately. The Ministry of Education, who does provide funding for childcare operators, they do provide funding to the operators through the City of London, I believe, for the provision to put in outdoor play space for the childcares. So that will be at the school. We are not currently funded to put in playground space for the K-8 portion of the school, unfortunately.
And I can confirm it'll be a 5-room childcare for 88 children. Any other questions?
From Tina, is there a Thames Valley policy in place that outlines how often students can be forced to switch schools? 3 switches in such a short time would be a lot for some of these kids.
Thank you for the question. So our attendance area review procedure does discourage involving schools in multiple attendance area reviews within a 5-year time frame. However, given the level of growth here, certainly we don't really have any other options, unfortunately, because of how quickly this area has changed and the level of growth that's still projected. We do certainly need a new school here, and the ministry has approved it. And as mentioned previously, we will need to fill the school with students and ultimately removing the enrollment pressure that we're experiencing at Summerside.
From Michelle, there's a question just around dates and when groups have to meet. So, Michelle, this slide deck that we went through tonight will be provided to everyone who's on the call tonight first thing tomorrow.
Any other questions? Seeing none. Thank you again, everyone, for volunteering to represent your school on the Attendance Area Review Committee. It's certainly very much appreciated, and the public consultation process is an important part. And certainly we are looking forward to receiving the feedback and incorporating as much as possible into the final Attendance Area Review report. In the meantime, if you do have any questions, certainly feel free to reach out to the planning team through Sonia with the email that will be sent out tomorrow. As well as through your school principal, if that's more convenient. And if there's any additional information that's required, once you have an opportunity to review the information presented here this evening in a bit more detail, certainly do reach out. Again, thank you for participating in this important process. Have a great evening, folks.